Gruesome Magazine.
Hello, once again, I am Doc Rotten, and this is Horror News Radio, the official Gruesome Magazine podcast. Well, back with me again this week are the scariest, goriest, bloodiest co-hosts on the net, and together we are going to review Hannibal, Season 1, Episode 9, Trou Normand, or is it True Normand? Whatever, it's both. I'm going to get it wrong. I'm hedging my bets. But we're going back to 2013 and covering, I know we just figured out how to say it and I forgot by the time we got here. All right, so we're going back to 2013. We're going to cover Hannibal Season 1 again. It's playing on Netflix, so we thought this was a good time to revisit this as it was one of our favorite shows at that time. Christopher, along with myself and Dave Dreher and the one and only Thomas Mariani, we covered Season 2 and Season 3 in the Hannibal fan podcast that we put out, but we never did one, so we thought this was a great time, like I said, to do this. And we brought along well, let's just introduce her, the one and only Vanessa Thompson. Yes, the podcast and rockstar and international cosplay queen.
Hi. Oh my God, these lights are so bright in my face. Let me see if I can turn those off. What is happening? Why? Oh, it's this thing back here. Maybe. I don't know. Why am I glowing like this? I just glow. I radiate.
You radiate. You're just beaming with enthusiasm for because this is your first trip down Hannibal Lane. Watching Season 1, yeah. So it's going to be exciting to hear what you have to say about it.
Thank you. Very glad to be a part of it.
All right. Also joining us is the one and only Christopher G. Moore. He is an award-winning filmmaker.
Yes, and my Hannibal shirt.
And a Fannibal.
Huge Fannibal. And yeah, I'm glad to be on here again talking about another episode in this first season of one of my favorite TV show ever.
It really is, because he talks about it all the time still. All right, what are we going to talk about?
I feel like that was a dig at me.
It wasn't a dig.
Nah.
No, you were not attacked. All right. Episode 9, Trou Normand, came out May 23rd, 2013, directed by Guillermo Navarro, writer Steve Lightfoot. Of course, it was created by Brian Fuller, based on the characters from Red Dragon by Thomas Harris. We have a guest star this week. Lance Henriksen is here. And he's he gets a scene, literally. He's a lot of fun. The rest of the cast are here. The synopsis goes: a totem pole of human bodies ranging from freshly killed to decades old are found on a beach. And while Graham is investigating the crime scene, he suddenly finds himself in Lecter's office 3.5 hours away with no recollection of how he got there. Lecter theorizes that Graham's mind is trying to escape from having to investigate such brutal murders. To be honest, it doesn't really get into a lot of what happens in this episode. That's just like the surface. Underneath all that, there's a lot going on with our characters, some reveals, some twists and turns as we lay the groundwork for the rest of the season. But let's find out what the crew think. That's what we do. We'll give our little first impressions. We'll talk about a little bit, and then at the end we'll give our final thoughts of score 1 to 5 and our favorite scene. So that's what you want to wait around for. You want to stick around and hear that. But first, let's do our first impressions. And Vanessa, you're up first. Let us have it.
First impression is this a little bit slower, right, from the track that we've been on. We've been getting a lot of information thrown at us, a lot of fantastical things happening just between our characters and their development. And this one kind of takes, it pumps the brakes a little bit, and we get that kind of murderer of the week back again. And this one's a lot of fun and really weird and kind of a big jerk when you find out at the end. He's not a very nice guy, aside from being a serial murderer. He's not a very nice guy. And also, what the hell's going on with Will? He's falling apart before our eyes, right? What is Hannibal doing to him, or what is happening to him that he can't handle? He's losing these big chunks of time, and nobody around him is noticing. That's a weird one to me. But you also see how Jack is more than willing to push Will over the edge, right? Because he keeps asking him, "You tell me, are you okay? Do you need to be pulled out of this?" Of course, Will is not going to say no, but you really just see how kind of cold and harsh Jack is being in that moment. And we get Abigail again. I was kind of losing track of her a little bit as to what happened to her and where we were going to go, and now she's hooking up with Freddie Lowndes. I feel like that. Again, I feel like that's a big mistake. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, granted, it's it's not one of my favorite episodes, but we get a lot of information that I guess more so around Abigail, right? Which it just feels like we haven't talked about her in so long that it's almost like we're going back again to the beginning of the series, right? Where her involvement was more prominent.
It does. It feels like this episode is out of order almost.
Yeah. Chris, can you elaborate on that? Do you know something about whether this is out of order or not?
All right. Let's get Chris up here to give us his first impression. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I don't think this specifically wasn't out of order, but yeah, this I will say that it's I think coming off of the last episode, it's going to feel a whole lot slower because it's a different pace. I think it's part of it is there to explore, Will Graham and his all of a sudden his descent into madness, which I guess they, I guess they're sort of using the whole totem thing as trying to relate that to him and relate that to Abigail, and how she's sort of dealing with what's next and realizing that because she's not going to have that sort of safety net of getting money from her house or whatever, that she's got to delve into, what happened and stuff to be able to live or to be able to get out of that, the crazy place that she's in. But yeah, it is kind of weird because when you have somebody like Lance Henriksen, you think you'd give him a little bit more screen time. But I think the time he's in there, he really
what a jerk.
He's a jerk, but he like pulls the focus for a little bit there, and just his delivery of lines, which the one big Silence of the Lambs moment happens in that dialogue. Did you guys catch that?
No, I didn't.
What was it? He's talking about his victims or whatever. Let me see if I can pull this up on my phone.
About it being his legacy
and stuff. And then I think Will Graham says, "Did Joel Silvers remember his father?" And he's like, "Not anymore." And that "not anymore" line is actually from Silence of the Lambs, because when Clarice says, "That doesn't interest me, Doctor," and frankly, it's the sort of thing that Miggs would say, and Miggs was the guy next to swallowed his own tongue because of Dr. Lecter, and he's like, "Not anymore." Mm-hmm. So, and even his delivery is very like Hannibal Lecterish.
How funny!
And actually, little trivia bit: Lance Henriksen was in a show called Millennium.
Yes, he was.
Where his character, I think it was called Frank Black, was kind of similar to Will Graham. And initially, Brian Fuller wanted to bring him back later in the season as sort of like a father-son dynamic type thing, but that never came to pass. So yeah, we got that, and the title of it is based on a small drink of what they call Calvados, which is like an apple brandy, and it's served between courses to reawaken appetite. So yeah, I will say this definitely not one of my favorites of this season, but it still has some really strong points. I think, with us seeing Will is about to crack, which for those of you that knows what happened as the season progresses, that kind of plays into how the season ends. So, him not knowing where he is, or how he got places, and he has these little blackout periods, or he thinks he's doing a seminar to his students and there's nobody there.
That was wild.
Then you have Bloom coming in there, and still making it awkward,
Messing with his head.
messing with his head. And, I mean, she's not helping things.
Helping, but not helping, and not helping. But because she also, he lets down his guard with her, right?
Mm-hmm.
When she asks him if he's feeling troubled or whatever it is she says. And that was really sad. That's another sad moment because he knows something is happening to him that is out of his logical control.
Well, and I think it's also pulling him more into his shell to where, you know, now, you know, he could have said something to Jack, but he didn't. Mm-hmm. You know, but the only person he can really confide in is Lecter. So
I was shocked that he actually did that he's not going to tell Jack and that he's going to side with Hannibal. It just shows how fractured he is from the start to the end of this particular episode. It shows how fractured he is, that he's so soft and so meek and so mild in that moment and needs protection, right? Even from himself, because he doesn't know what's going on. But
then
that's crazy.
He finally figures out what happened with Abigail. Mm-hmm. And then there's that whole confrontation to where like he could have, you know, done what needed to be done, but he was willing to sort of like, because Hannibal's really putting the guilt on him that with his attachment to Abigail.
Well,
Hannibal twisted those screws, man.
He's digging to cover his own ass, right? Because if it comes out on him. Yep. He's involved himself too much where she knows too much. And you know, now I feel like now maybe we're getting the starts of Will beginning to doubt Hannibal, right? Mm-hmm. That everything he says is true because he's basically told him he lied and is asking him to lie. So yeah, we're kind of seeing that little. It's weird because you're seeing it crack, but at the same time, he still needs him so much.
Well, you also see it takes a blow to the bromance, right? Because he all but turns his back to Hannibal during that that confrontation, that discussion. He's looking out the window and he never looks at Hannibal. Hannibal even puts his hand on his shoulder. He still doesn't look at him. It's they focused on that. Did you guys notice that when Hannibal found out that Will figured it out, that he reached for the scalpel and then put it back down on the table?
Yeah, he did a little
he made a similar decision there too, right?
Yeah, he was
similar to Will's. Like, should I do what I need to do and kill him? Or, you know, and so I think that's and I really love the shot when they're at the window, because the way that they have those curtains, it causes a lot of black and a lot of fracturedness on their faces to show the fractured people that they are. So I love that, how they do that visually sometimes in some of the shots on this show.
Yeah, I thought this episode, like you guys are saying, is a little slower. It feels like we're stepping back a bit. There's enough character development in here to make it worthwhile and still, be still great television. It's the story about the totem feels more like filler, and it also feels like a really bizarre Tales from the Crypt episode, right? Because it's the killer gets his comeuppance at the end, one of those little surprise, you guess what you did thing, which was, they and the way they delivered that information to Lance Henriksen's character was, very much in the EC comics kind of way, like dun dun dun, you are the baby's daddy. And so I wasn't a big fan of all that, and it there's a whole lot about okay, this obviously wasn't it was on a beach. It had to be a lake, right? Because it can't be in West Virginia a beach on the coast, right? So there's got to be a pretty good sized lake somewhere there. It was weird, but it just felt, I don't know, some of the stuff just didn't kind of gel.
How did old ass Lance Henriksen get that totem pole up.
I would, that's always was something. I was like, that's a big ass thing to be.
He didn't even get out of the chair. Maybe
You
it felt
gotta
broken, but-
tie a bunch of body parts onto it, and the body parts aren't exactly going to be small because it's not like he killed a bunch of kids or anything.
No.
And then he's got to pull that thing up, and he's got to dig a hole in the mud.
However, the guy flayed
Bam,
himself
yeah.
and hung himself
Yeah,
in
and then
the rafters is how Lance Henriksen did.
Yeah, and he had to dig up all those bodies, every one of those bodies. So I mean, even I
that guy into a little sandwich.
Yeah, and I guess we kind of overlook it because it's kind of a cool visual, like a lot of these. Because if you think about,
that makes sense.
Well, if you think about any of these artful ways that people die on this show that we'll see throughout all 3 seasons, some of those take a lot of time to be able to do. Especially, well, I'm not going to get into it, but yeah, there's certain there's certain things that happen in other episodes. It would take a good amount of time to build. So sometimes you have to have that give it a little bit of a doubt when it comes to movie magic. But I think even when I first saw it, I was like, that's a lot of work. I had to take like weeks to do.
Right.
Yeah. And how did they not, that with it being like a lake or something, you think somebody would see it, but yeah, but still, I mean, but yeah, it's still a, it is kind of interesting because you have like with this episode you have the Hannibal Will character again. They're different sides of the same coin, and then you have Alana Bloom and Jack Crawford, same, because they're both like stubborn on each end. They're stood, and so I always love that about this show where it's not just one person; it's 2 different people usually, at the least, dealing with or maybe dealing with similar things or coming from different perspectives and going head to head, and that makes it very interesting because Jack Crawford's getting he's turning into a little bit of an asshole in this one as well.
He becomes a huge asshole in this
episode. Do you think, talking about him and Alana Bloom, do you think that he might be beginning to doubt Hannibal? Because to her, she was it was very important for her to say, regardless of how I feel about Abigail, those feelings don't cross over to Hannibal. When he's running Abigail through the gamut of, did you kill this person? Whatever. Mm-hmm. And Jack and Bloom have it out. Do you think at this point he's starting to think that? Or is that something maybe that hadn't crossed his mind at this point?
This may plant the seed at the very least.
Her saying that?
Yeah.
Yeah, which ties into later. So
because we already know. So it's interesting to see someone who doesn't know make those kinds of statements, because then it changes how you have it framed in your mind.
Although I'm wondering, do you think Freddie Lounds knows that Hannibal is a cannibal, or do you think she's vegetarian on purpose?
Oh,
no, I think she's just a vegetarian on purpose.
I don't know.
You don't know? You think maybe?
Remember later, you have to ruin it with all that meat.
Yeah, later on, because that just seemed like a jab at Hannibal.
That might just be coincidental.
And of course, Chilton did the same thing later on, where he just makes sure he just has. Although if you want to be strictly a non-cannibal vegetarian, hopefully he's cleaning the surfaces so you don't get any residue on your salad.
Oh, that's terrible. All right, speaking about that dinner, I thought I don't think that dinner scene was really well done. I really had a problem with that dinner scene because there's a tension that was supposed to be represented there between Abigail and Will that is present, but it's not felt, especially not felt like it was when she was being questioned by Jack, right? Earlier. And I thought that was such a kind of a weak moment. And they, so much so that they literally had to kind of follow it up with some exposition in the scene after it. The scene, there were some missteps in this episode.
But there were still some really good strengths. I mean,
that's true.
I love that whole confrontation between Abigail and Jack Crawford. It's a very powerful scene, I think. you know, and I that actress who plays Abigail, I think is so great. In
She's
the
a good
series.
person.
I'm surprised I wonder if she's been in other stuff, but yeah, I think her having to sort of, you know, or even later on when she kind of breaks down in front of Hannibal, I think she has probably one of the strongest performances in this episode.
Yep. Outside of that dinner scene, but when Hannibal, you know, kind of caresses her and everything, it's more like she's more like clay in his hands. Like, okay, let me mold you into what I'm.
His pet.
I got you now. Now. You know, there's nothing. I mean, there really isn't anything evil about what's going on, but below the surface, there ain't nothing but evil going on. It's really interesting how layered those kind of scenes are. That scene and the scene where Hannibal is manipulating Will, you know, to lie. And he goes all in, you know, Hannibal goes all in. He doesn't grab the scalpel. He could have put the scalpel in his pocket. Can you imagine how tense that scene would be if he picked that scalpel up and then had that conversation? It's like, oh man.
And I think I'm starting to realize, you know, every time he goes to observe one of these crime scenes, he pops some pills, and I'm like, I really think those pills are laced, and that's what's causing him to have these sort of like schizophrenic attacks or whatever, because he takes those pills and he sees it and then he blacks out.
Something's happening.
Something. I think it's more than just a mental break. I think that, you know, again, we had that one episode where he gave Abigail that drugs or whatever to open her mind or whatever.
Mushrooms.
And I think that I don't think they've ever even pointed that out in the series that he was being drugged, but I really feel, I mean, who's fulfilling his prescription?
Exactly.
No kidding.
His psychiatrist. I'm beginning to dislike Hannibal more and more.
Oh no.
Not the actor or anything, the character. Which is,
well, he's a very manipulative person. You know, he can be very suave, but you definitely see how he's a little bit selfish, and he's always willing to manipulate people just to keep himself, you know, out of trouble. And he's willing to cut your throat.
Do what he wants.
Keep doing what he wants. You know.
Yeah, I think, just thinking on this, I think one of the reasons this episode doesn't particularly gel with me as well is because our characters are pulling away from each other instead of coming together. And the other episodes, you know, this character or that character, you know, create a bond, but here it's all about stretching those bonds, or maybe breaking those bonds, or you know, it's a lot about stress. Even the one with Abigail, even though it ends with that bond being, you know, restructured, you know, it's broken early on. So I think that's why this particular episode isn't gelling with me.
That's a good point.
I think so. That, and, you know, the killer is backfiller, but it gets better. If I recall, it gets better.
Not every episode can be, you know, 100% go the whole time.
Yes, it can. It's Hannibal.
Yeah. Although I do like the idea of a killer, almost his greatest hits type thing, where he creates sort of this monolith thing of bodies of everybody he's killed since like 1970 or 1973. He's a jerk, but I do find that a very interesting thing, that like he's gotten away with it for so long, but then like at the end of his life, he's like, he creates almost like a trophy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A beacon to like, hey, this is all the crazy shit I did.
His legacy.
Yeah.
You killed your legacy, Lance Henriksen.
I did like that, where he thought he was the smartest man in the room, and then
he did for a moment.
He
really did.
Yeah, like, I loved his reaction. It's like,
yeah,
it was just simple. It was just his hand beating up against the chair, but he was all packed up. He had everything ready to go. Sitting in that chair, waiting for him. Oh no!
I know.
all the excitement is getting taken up. All right, well, it's time to do this. It's time to wrap it up. Give our final thoughts, our score, and our favorite scene. You're going to want to hear this, hang out just a little bit longer. But first, before we do, if you're enjoying this, and I hope you are, I hope you're sticking with us and having a good time, hit the subscribe button down below, hit the like or dislike, and leave us some comments. There's a bell there too. If you smash that or whatever they ask you to do, you can get, you get notified.
Hit it like Lance Henriksen.
Hit it like just smack on it. Smack Jimmy behind the ear. I don't care, whatever you want to do.
Smack it, flip it, rub it down. Oh no.
All right, let's do this. Our final thoughts, our score and favorite scene. Vanessa, you are up first.
Me. This was a little slower of an episode. Still lots of important information that we got. And I think the point that you made about everybody fracturing it kind of hits the nail on the head, because that's what's happening. Everybody's kind of having their own internal fractures and fracturing away from each other. Which is a weird kind of liminal space to be in right now. I'm really interested to see what the next episode is going to bring. What is the next point that we're going to jump off to now? I'm sure something involving Abigail and Hannibal's involvement. But yeah, so, overall, like I said, it does give us information into our characters, but the totem is a little outrageous to me. Although it visually looked really cool. And when they zoomed in on the guy on the top, the final kill, I really thought he was going to blink or something.
Oh my God.
I was going to lose it. Because like I was saying, they did it with the mushroom people. So I hold nothing past them to do a kind of jump scare, kind of like that. But yeah, that totem pole was brutal, but it visually looked awesome. So I'm going to give this one, I think I'm going to give this one a 3.75 as far as scale goes, which is, I think is pretty low, honestly, for Hannibal it is. But really, aside from the character points, this episode didn't get me as excited as all the other ones have. I'm more excited for the next one now to see what the next one's going to be, because I feel like that one's probably going to take us on a bit of a high note. Favorite scene, absolutely when Will agrees to keeping the Abigail and Hannibal's secret, because that's a turning point there. Will is fractured in this moment. He doesn't know what's going on with himself. He has very little control over himself and his awareness. He's being heavily manipulated and probably medicated by Hannibal. And now the one glimmer of hope that he's had in his life has been kind of tainted, and it's making him question everything. It's just such a crazy moment. Never thought he would do it. But now we have to see. Where it goes.
Good points. All right, Christopher G. Moore, Fannibal among Fannibals. Final thoughts, score, favorite scene.
Yeah, I will say this seems to be every once in a while you get a little bit of a lull in the season, and this seems to be like that, where, and I do agree with you, Doc, when it comes to, I think with everybody sort of having their 6 feet of social distancing with their feelings or their issues, it kind of puts you at arm's length when it comes to getting into this episode, but it still has some really strong performances, especially from the actress who plays Abigail Hobbs, and of course, there's always the cool kills, and so you have that sort of interesting totem pole, but at the same time, it's still very logically doesn't seem like possible for an old man to do, who can't even seem to get out of his chair. So yeah, but it's still, but it's not one of those things to where, it's a standalone, because it's still, you have a lot of Will, his mental state starting to fracture. Abigail's getting a little bit of that too. And so you still see some progression in the character arcs with some of these people. And the same goes for Hannibal as well, He's sort of doing things he's not used to doing as well because of his relationship with Will. And there's a little bit of animosity now between Bloom and Crawford. So yeah, everybody's sort of at each other's throats, or at the same time making decisions that goes against the grain of how they are, and them having to deal with that. So it's sort of an interesting episode that sort of, is an in-between episode, but it's still better than a lot of things you see on television. As for rating, I'll probably get a 4.25. It's probably lower than I normally give for stuff. But I still think there's some really strong parts in it. I don't think everything has to be visually perfect or anything, but I think this one, if it wasn't for a lot of Abigail Hobbs's really strong performances throughout, and also just I just love seeing the acting through people's physicality, because there's parts where you can see Hannibal, you can see the gears turning in his head.
Yeah.
You can see the gears turning in Will's head, especially when he's having to respond, when you can sort of tell he's not really telling the truth. Although I think the part when he's talking to Jack Crawford, you could almost see on his face that he knows he's not stable or okay.
Yeah, and he's still letting him go.
Because he's almost like he's acting a little crazy. Yeah. So you think Crawford being with the behavioral unit, he'd figure that out. But as for favorite scene, I think I'll probably just say what I said earlier. What I really love the scene where Bloom brings Abigail to Jack Crawford to show him the body, and then Jack's trying to be a whole dick about it because he's wanting to get Abigail to confess, and Abigail's having to hold shit together, and Alana Bloom wants to rip Jack's head off. So I love that sort of like that tension between three different people with three different emotional responses to things, and I think that's one of the big strengths of this series is the actors and who they pick for things.
Definitely.
Don't fuck with Alana Bloom, right?
Don't do that. All right. This is, like I said, this is an episode that didn't ring with me as well as others. It has to happen. I mean, every once in a while, a series episodic, has to have a shift episode, right? Where they kind of have to shift the characters around to get set up for the next, chapter of the story. And this feels like that episode, right? It feels like a chess move on their part. And it doesn't land as strong. And there's a couple of offbeats, like the dinner scene didn't really work for me this time as well as others have. I do agree, Christopher, that the performances, however, are very strong from everybody. Everybody has really wonderful scenes. So I'm going to give it. I was going to give it a 3.5. I feel bad. I really feel bad about that, but
just give whatever you feel, man.
Yeah.
No, don't be Will Graham. Don't be wussing out. Say how you feel.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I will say my favorite scene, though, is when, and this is spoilers, but if you've watched the show, you know what we're talking about. When Abigail finally, very quietly, admits that she did it, that she helped her dad. And Hannibal goes, "What? I didn't hear you. Could you say it louder?" Oh man, stick it in.
So rude.
But he that whole scene, it ends with him saying, I was wondering when you were going to finally admit it and tell. And and then he holds her. It's just like, oh man, he's been building for this this one last manipulation, and that's it finally happened for him. And then she's, fully his at this point.
But
mold as he wishes.
I just remembered that whole end scene where you actually see how she
the cuts
girls for her dad is creepy.
Yeah, black and white, and they're on a train.
Oh, I was like, that's horrible, because she's like, I mean, granted, it's not. She's still a monster for doing those things, but at the same time,
what would anyone else have done? But she's like threatened her life.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like either you're gonna die or you help these other girls die.
Yeah, she's truly a victim, like Hannibal said.
Yeah, so you could sort of see that you can even see it in her performance. That's another good physical performance in just the face, because you can see like, And
Yeah, when she looks back at him, yeah,
it's heartbreaking.
yeah.
It is.
Even the father was doing great because when that little
Well, the father's
smile.
like gives that creepy smile.
Oh
So he just
man,
punch him in his
so
face.
this episode has its moments. It does,
Mhm.
but it's still, compared to most every other series, I'd still rather watch this one again. So, all right, there you go. That's our review of Hannibal Season 1, Episode 9. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you stuck around and listened this far. If you did and you're still listening, thank you for being here. Thank you for hanging out. If you're interested, we also do Lovecraft Country. Check that out. It's also a very good show. So that should be right around this one. So go check it out. All right, Christopher, Vanessa, thank you for joining me.
Always fun.
Yes, thanks for having us.
Let's say good night.
Good night.
Good night.